Coach Brandon Bonsey, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First question for you off the bat. We're recording this on August 7th, the day after the U.S. Olympic men's final in the 1500. As a guy who is a legendary coach in the sport and specifically distance running, what are your quick takes 24 hours removed from that race that will definitely go down in history for the rest of our lives?
Yeah, it's incredible. It seems like I guess my biggest take is like tactical finals and middle distance and distance events seem to have gone away, and you need to be uh, incredibly strong to be good at those events. I mean, you look at Kerr started running like a half marathon in December. Obviously, Cole ran 12:58. I think yards ran 13:02. Hobbs ran 7:39 this winter. So my main takeaway was like the days of kind of only working on your speed and getting ready for like a Centro like 350 type final are gone. You got to be, you know, they were 247 at 1200, which is just complete insanity. So obviously you need to be fast to do that, but just so strong. And Hawker closing in 39 for his final 300 off of that pace is like one of the most like mind-boggling things I've ever heard. So it was really really cool to watch and so exciting to have the U.S. be that good, and all those guys are really young too. So should be around in 2028. So any 1500 runner in the U.S. needs to get to work in these next 4 years.
What's your take on how this will affect the next generation of athletes who I'm sure you'll get to recruit here soon in the coming years? Just in terms of, I think anytime you see an event dominated by the U.S., the prep culture kind of surrounds it. It's like a school, if a sport does really well, the athletes coming in immediately become interested because they want to be a part of the success. I think I heard the stat on the broadcast that this is the first time in 112 years that we've had 2 out of the 3 medals in the men's 15. And then also you look at the level below it and the collegiate scene, milers are running out of their mind. You look at the high school scene, more sub 4 milers than ever before. One of your athletes, Tenoda, last year did it in high school when I thought no one saw that coming. What's your general perspective on just, the future for U.S. men's distance running?
Yeah, I think it's just going to make people believe they can be the best in the world. Like I remember when I kind of first was getting into the sport, getting into high school. I was a freshman in high school in 2000. It was a fairly rough time for U.S. distance running at the highest level. And then when I was a freshman in high school was when Alan Webb and Ritzenhein were seniors. So obviously seeing him run 353 and Ritz, winning Foot Locker twice was those guys were like massive influences on me as a 14-year-old that knew nothing about the sport. And I think like you even saw with like that generation, people started to believe the U.S. has just gotten so much better since then. And obviously this was a massive jump, and Grant included. It's I think Ben got a medal in the 10K on the men's side since Galen in 2012. So yeah, I just think young kids, like the ratings for the Olympics right now are insane. So I'm sure there's a lot of like 13, 14-year-old kids watching right now that are like, oh, I want to be like Cole Hawker, and they have an example that they actually can do that.
Throughout your years of coaching, obviously Hobbs didn't go to college, but the other two you coached against, were there ever any athletes that you coached against that you saw them run and just thought, man, it's unfortunate I got to coach against them, but they're going to do big things at the next stage of their career?
I mean, so many. Obviously, those two. I remember the first time I saw Donovan Brazier run. It was like seeing like someone do a different sport. um, so he's one that um, that comes to mind. He's the number one person that I think of with that. But then obviously, I mean that final, that 1500 final at NCAA's in 2021, where Cole and Yard went 1-2, and I think ran 148 their last 800 was insane. I mean, we had a guy, Jack Salisbury, in that who I thought ran a great race and came in sixth, but he got smoked by those two guys and was in good shape. So yeah, I'm as much as it sounds crazy to say that you're not surprised that two U.S. guys went 1-3. Like watching them in the collegiate system, I'm not not shocked by anything that either of them do.
What are some things you think the NCAA system does really well for our athletes, and some things you don't think do as well?
You learn how to compete. I think that's the number one thing. Learn how to go through rounds. Like I'm really impressed with Hobbs learning how to do that, especially this year, World Indoors and the Olympics. But he struggled a little bit with that kind of earlier in his career because I think probably losing that foundation from even just at your conference. You're someone as good as Hobbs, you're probably not worried about making the final at your conference meet, but even just like going through the warm up, having to do it, and then having a little bit of fatigue in your legs to run the next day. So I think that's the number one thing is you just learn how to compete. It's not all about time or anything like that, especially during the outdoor season where the regional times are a little easier. I mean, the only downside is maybe not as much time to train. There's so much stuff you have to get ready for. Like, me coaching like Tenoda, he's such an exciting athlete, and there's so many different events. I really would love to have him try, but indoors it takes so fast to get your time. We have to run a DMR qualifier. We have to go to our conference meet. Then after NCAA's, rest a little bit, get a regional time. We go to Penn Relays. Our alums would probably riot if we didn't. So there's so many like times that there maybe training you'd want to do more or race some off events that it's just tough to fit everything in. I think sometimes you look back and you look at some of the athletes that maybe in June are struggling a little bit. Maybe they did try to squeeze in too much during the regular season, and that's easy to do with our calendar.
We mentioned a minute ago that the 13 or 14-year-old watching the Olympics who might get fired up from watching the races yesterday and want to really get after it in training. As someone who recruits the best high school kids in the nation, what's your general view and perspective on an athlete's history with sport of running as well as other sports, in the sense that, like, if you were, parenting a kid, how would you, and you wanted them to be really good one day, what's your take on kind of the Jakob model where we're going to dedicate your life to the sport at 6 years old versus the more conservative model that also works, I think, a lot of times, of like you're going to play basketball, not run indoor track until sophomore year, and you're not even going to go all in until you get in the hands of a college coach?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of Jakobs that don't pan out the way that he has. I think getting too serious about the sport at a young age isn't necessarily the greatest thing in the world. So I would just encourage young kids to do what makes them happy and do other sports. I think the athleticism you gain from playing other sports helps a lot. Like I could be wrong on this, but I think Grant Fisher wasn't a full-time runner until like his junior year of high school or something like that. He played soccer. I mean, his brother is a great soccer player, played at Stanford. So, yeah, I think the athleticism you develop from playing other sports is important, but also just like running's a really mentally taxing thing, and getting too serious about it when you're 13, you sometimes then can get to your 20 or 21 and you just don't have the mental bandwidth for it anymore. So that would be my advice.
For you, when you're coaching an athlete, they come into your hands, generally, do you have a sense of how far they can go in the sport, or how often are you surprised in terms of, like, there's a 13-year-old who could train like Jakob and barely make it D1, but then there's the Fisher example where that guy trained so conservatively in high school and is managing to medal all these years later and has gotten like progressively more serious. Do you feel like as a coach you have a decent gauge on like how far an athlete can go, and when, because for you, you might see an athlete like Tenoda and know the goal is like, medaling at the Olympics one day. I don't think that's a crazy notion to throw out there. But on the other hand, I'm sure there are athletes in your hands that the goal is, not to run professionally and to be an All-American by the time that college is over, in which sense you probably want to be a little more aggressive while you have them. Or am I wrong in that? What's the
No,
take
you're
there?
not. There's probably like a range of outcomes that you could see for each person. You never want to put, um, a cap on necessarily what you think someone can accomplish, but you also want to be realistic at the same time, like, and kind of celebrate the accomplishments along the way. The sport's like super hard, so if you're only going to compare yourself against like the top of the NCAA or running pro or medaling, like those in between achievements need to be celebrated, or just the sport's too hard. But yeah, I mean, the realistically, the number of people going to be like fighting for a medal, even within the entire NCAA, is just not a massive number. So yeah, some people here are like, hey, let's have a good experience, get a great degree at Georgetown, and run as well as you can, and go get a job when you're done. Others want to keep running at the next level and put them in a position to do that. But I don't think it alters the way necessarily we would train. I'm always going to take like a long term approach with everyone and try to have them kind of methodically develop. And I think if they want to keep running at the next level, they're going to be able to get a lot better. I don't think we're trying to like totally max out everyone and train at like the 99% level while they're in college. So I think those that do want to go on and have the talent and the ability to keep running can get a lot better.
From the athletes you've coached who have made it to the next level, what are some of those commonalities in terms of attributes that you feel like have allowed them to go to that next level?
Yeah, I think just like um, I think at any like really high level academic school, like a Georgetown, like I think about this with like Stanford and Grant at this moment. You almost have to rebel a little bit to get to a really high level, because just your average student there is putting so much time into school, and our guys do as well. But I think to reach like the highest level of even the NCAA at a high level school takes a lot of discipline, and I think those type of people will just continue to get a lot better, especially when you remove them uh, from the academic environment that they're in. You look at like Grant was an incredible NCAA runner, but he's a better pro runner, and I think you've seen that with a lot of different people. So I just think the discipline it takes at a school like Georgetown to do well in school, and also run at a high level, it's very possible. But um, it does take discipline and planning, and I think the people that can do it are really well suited to be able to do it at the pro level.
Let's go way back in time to your own endeavors as an athlete and how they relate to the University of Georgetown, and all the cool crossovers there as we speak today in 2024. But first, let's kind of set the stage. Take me through your start in the sport of running. How'd you get your start, and what were your first impressions of the sport?
Yeah, so my dad was a runner. He ran at the University of Maine. He was an 800-meter runner. Um, my grandfather on my mom's side was like a good local road racer. He got into running later in life, but was a pretty good marathoner and road racer. So I would see them running when I was little. So yeah, I started doing like youth track and stuff when I was pretty young. I always played other sports, even like uh, my freshman year of high school. I didn't do indoor track. I played basketball. Was just on the freshman team. I wasn't that good, but so always was playing other sports. I didn't even really run cross country like in the middle school time. I was playing soccer, but I did like the USATF, Junior Olympic stuff, all of that. But yeah, running was kind of just like a thing everyone in the family did. Like my sister ran at the University of Maine and is the head coach at University of New England now. So it's just kind of like a thing we do. I mean, all summer I've been going to road races with my sister. She has a 16-month-old daughter, so I'm a babysitter when she runs a little bit. But yeah, running's just kind of always been in the family.
I brought us back to the past for a reason to go through your running journey, but then you brought up your sister and how she's a coach as well, and that intrigues me. So diving down that route, how often are you guys calling each other throughout the season, picking each other's brains? What workout should we do? What's this race go? Yada yada yada. What's that relationship like?
Yeah, I feel like it's less talking about like in our family group chat constantly like sharing each other's results from the team and stuff like that. Because a lot of times like we'll both have meets at the same time. So it's hard for me to like, and for her to keep up with what we're doing. Probably like the X's and O's of training, not as much. It's just more like sharing what life as a coach is like, and obviously it's everything is evolving within the NCAA. So it's more um, talking about like interactions we've had with kids on the team, their parents, or kind of what's going on in the athletic department in general. But yeah, we talk quite a bit about that stuff.
I'm sure Georgetown is at a completely different level than your sister school, New England. But out of curiosity, have you ever tried to recruit the same kid?
They do. Yeah, there's one person on the team. Um, my sister's University of New England had this really specific major that he was interested in. So yeah, the kid had reached out to me. So yeah, I've I don't think she's ever recruited someone that was looking at Georgetown. So technically, I think she's 1-0 against me in a recruiting battle. So she's got bragging rights right now.
Sure. So you kind of took me through that beginning in the sport, the family origin, the history within it. For you, when did you realize that it was something you wanted to do at the next level and explore in a collegiate setting?
I think I always knew running was my best sport, and I've always paid very close attention uh, to the sport. I've always been really into sports in general. I like when I was little, I'd wake up way before school and watch all of Sports Center, so I knew everything that had gone on the night before. Um, so I think probably like in middle school or something, like I was having success at like the USATF Junior Olympic level, but I also loved playing other sports, and all my friends played other sports. So it probably wasn't until like my sophomore year that I got pretty serious about it and kind of like really looked into what my options would be for college. But I think probably in the back of my mind, even as like a young kid, I realized I probably could run in college. It was just giving up like my basketball dreams and stuff like that took a little time.
Speaking present day here, we're bouncing between eras, but that's totally okay. That's what conversations are. U.S. Olympic men's team. Some conversations have been floated around about them choking as a potential basketball Olympian if you would have followed that route. We'll just say that. Give you your flowers there. What's the take on this team? Gold or no?
Yeah, I just think it's so overwhelming. I mean, you look at guys like, um, if you can have DNPs from Tatum and Embiid and they're still winning. I mean, there's just so much talent, and I think they built it well with obviously a bunch of stars, and then um, I'm a Celtics fan, so I'm biased, but I think Drew Holiday and Derek White are really good role players on this team and aren't trying to shoot that much and do all the stuff that the star players necessarily don't want to do. But yeah, I'd be surprised if a lot. Their just talent's pretty overwhelming.
One of my favorite stats I saw was the entire salary of Team USA men's basketball combined from the NBA was $5.1 billion, and then it compared it to the GDP of the entire country of South Sudan was like 6.1.
Wow,
And it's like our
that's
salaries
crazy.
almost. It's like
Yeah,
how can you
and
lose?
still barely beat them in the
I
exhibition.
know, I know, tragic. Anyway, so go off to Georgetown. I want to hear this. First impressions of Coach Henner.
Oh, I was completely afraid of him. I was very low mileage in high school, and I don't even know that I fully like articulated that to him. And our summer training wasn't like I don't think my mileage got super high. If I ran more than 50 miles, I'd be surprised. But I felt something in my shin, and my friend's dad was a doctor, got an MRI, and I had a stress fracture. And I called him. It all happened like quickly. I called him. I thought he'd be sympathetic, and he just screamed at me for not telling him that my shin had been bothering me before. So I showed up to school hurt. I got, injuries kind of come in twos when you're coming back from something, and got hurt again very quickly. But yeah, I think I was very afraid of him. He actually was like kind of a softie once you actually got to know him, but he's like an intimidating figure when especially as an 18-year-old that I was like embarrassed that I was hurt and couldn't run more than 50 miles a week over the summer without getting hurt. So
You're kind of the third person that's been brought up on the podcast many times. You get the Henner at the top, and then Smith and Milt. What was your kind of era with Smith and Milt in terms of age, and what were the impressions of those guys as well?
Yeah, so I didn't overlap with, I mean, Mike transferred in, but I believe they were actually in the same grade. So they're like 5 or 6 years older than me. Milt's wife was a fifth year when I was a freshman. So he was like, would coming back and visiting her occasionally. I met him like a couple times. I obviously knew who he was. Mike, I've known my entire life. So our families, like both of our grandparents owned a place on a lake in Maine called Crescent Lake. And the houses are in Maine, we call them camps. We're two down. So like Mike's uncle is my dad's best friend. It was like his best man in his wedding. So Mike being like 5 or 6 years older than me at that age, like a 10-year-old's not really hanging out with a 16-year-old. Like I would
Sure.
see him there, and I knew he was a runner. And that was actually how I like kind of got connected with Georgetown, was just through Mike. I think Henner actually, there used to be this meet in Maine called the Maine Distance Festival. It was a pretty good track meet in the summer. And Henner came up and stayed up at the lake for the race. But yeah, I've known Mike my whole life. Worked with Milt, I think, for 1 month at Georgetown before he went to Stanford, and then obviously worked with Mike for 4 years before he left for NAU. So yeah, know both those guys super well. But I wasn't in school at the same time as them.
Gotcha. So obviously, I've brought this up on podcasts with those two respectively. Doing it with you, the Henner pipeline is quite remarkable at this point. Just how many of his athletes have gone on to coach at such a high level. And now I'm starting to joke with all of your athletes. I joked with Robert Brandt the other month. I was like, you know, Coach Smith is starting to have athletes start to coach. Milt now has Alex as the assistant of Bowerman. I was like, come on, Rob, like get in the game. Why do you think, what are some of the things you learned from Henner that you think have made him have such successful athletes go on to be successful coaches?
He's a very, very thorough coach in every aspect, whether it's your mileage, the workouts, the strides you do, what you do in the weight room, drills, stretching. So he takes like a very, very holistic approach to coaching, and is very specific with what he does. And then also as an athlete, like always explain to us like why we were doing it. So I think you kind of leave after running for him with a pretty big knowledge of training just from your own experiences and him telling you stuff. And he's big on coming up after races to talk about it and watch a video of it and try to learn from it. So yeah, the people in the program that like were really into it and wanted to get good, I think I learned a lot about the sport. And then I think as Milt, Mike, and I all working for him, he just gave us all a lot of responsibility and kind of like let us learn on the job when we were young. gave us a good opportunity, and I know I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I'm sure those two would both say the same. But he let us learn and like really like pushed us to make good decisions in like recruiting, training, race schedules, all of that. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is he's just like a very thorough and holistic coach, and you can learn, basically like any area of training that you need. Same with the mental side of training, how to prepare someone. Like he was just really good at that as a coach, and then also really good at that as a mentor and a boss, kind of teaching us all some of that stuff.
So when you were an athlete at Georgetown, I believe it was your senior year, you were the team captain of both the cross country and track and field teams. And then I also know that you were selected to be a part of and participate in the Veteran Leaders Program, which is a Georgetown leadership program designed for team captains to develop the skills and knowledge critical to be an effective and vocal leader. What was those experiences like? And at that point, was coaching something you were interested in? And if not, did those experiences kind of change your perspective on, I'm not too bad at this leadership stuff. Maybe I should take over a team one day.
Yeah, I don't know how much I was like paying attention to the leadership class. I would like to. I think it's more a good thing to put on my resume. I'm sure it was
Hey,
great.
it
I
got
think
brought up
like
on a podcast years later, so it
yeah,
worked.
yeah, I'm sure it was great. I think I was between school and running. Um, Probably had little bandwidth for else, but my work study through my financial aid package actually was with Coach Henner. So I worked with him for however many hours a week that I could, and just helping him with just random office stuff. Especially once he was like the head cross country coach my first 3 years of school, and then was promoted to director. So once he was director, like he had a lot more stuff he had to do, and so I was just in the office all the time, and I probably heard conversations I shouldn't have heard or anything, but that was when I like kind of got to know Milt. So he came in my fourth year. It was a women's coach, so kind of got to see how they interacted. So yeah, I was just up there a lot and would like um, I mainly was helping him with recruiting stuff. Like I was, would watch videos or look at results, and I think I predicted like a couple people would do well on some stuff, and he started to trust me. So obviously, he wasn't like calling recruits or anything like that, but I was like on mile split and die stat and stuff like that, trying to, help him find people that thought were good fits, and I enjoyed that. So, yeah, I guess I hadn't like I was so fixated on like attempting. I got hurt a lot in college. So I was just very fixated on like trying to be consistent with my training and trying to run. That I didn't. I probably should have been thinking more about like what am I going to do for a job. I kind of was like, all right, I'm doing this, and then graduated and was like, oh, okay, this is over. What am I doing now? And thankfully, um, Coach Henner saw something in me. It was just a volunteer at first, but I got to for a year work with him and Milt and learn more from them, and then went to at that point was like, okay, I enjoy this, and I think I can be good at it, and ended up going to Syracuse University for 2 years.
For you, I'm curious to hear this, as your experience as an athlete yourself, and also how you now coach athletes in this position. It sounds like decently early in your collegiate career, you kind of realized, the injury cycle was difficult to get out of, and it probably was something that was going to end after your time at Georgetown. How did you cope with that as an athlete? And also now as a coach, how do you coach athletes where it's pretty clear that, either they can't go to the next level or they don't want to, or both, and kind of having that peaceful exit and transition out of the sport when it has been your entire life up until that point, or at least a large portion and focus of your life?
Yeah, it's hard, and I don't even know that like there's any real way to prepare. I remember when I was done, it was like I was staying up till like 4 in the morning watching Lost on my computer, the show, because I was like, I don't have to go to bed anymore. And yeah, it was an odd transition for sure. In a way, it felt like something was lifted off of me because I really like was trying to stay healthy and trying to run well, and it just wasn't happening. And there was probably somewhat of a sense of relief, but it was also I didn't really know what to do with my time at the same time. So I kind of identified myself uh, as a runner for a super long time, and I don't know that there's any way to fully um, prepare someone for what that's like. I think I pay close attention to all sports, and basically every athlete when they retire, there's a period of time where they don't really know what what they're doing. As far as preparing athletes for that, yeah, sometimes you kind of need to like if it's an injury thing, kind of let them come to you, or maybe initiate the conversation a little bit, but kind of let them do it. 'Cause sometimes it's so clear where it's like second semester, their senior year, been banged up for a while. It's like, hey, like, what's going to make you happy here? And try to go that way. Um, and then, yeah, if they're just like kind of done and uh, maybe not an injury thing, but it's clear they're not going to run at the next level, just trying to help them in any way possible with kind of what the next phase of their life is going to be, whether that's grad school or getting a job, Georgetown has an incredible alumni network, so trying to put them in touch with the right people to either connect with the job or just talk about what their experience has been like. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's honestly no different than, after going through this process with Parker Stokes running pro and signing with the Beast, it's not much different. It was just I had much more of an expertise on, how he could, I mean, it's his job now, how he could get a job with Brooks versus I would someone, trying to work in finance. But I can try and help him point them in the right direction as best I can. And I do think like the people that kind of have an idea of what they are going to do next year can run pretty well at the end of their senior or their fifth year. It's those people with the uncertainty and the stress that sometimes like really struggle at the end. So regardless of what it is, trying to help them have, something in place so that they know kind of what they're going to be doing in 2 months.
Obviously, as a coach, as someone who recruits your athletes, you have that personal investment in them, want to see them succeed. That's the business itself, right? As a coach, that's what that word means. For you, when you see an athlete do everything right, show up to practice every day with the mindset of wanting to get better, wanting to listen to your leadership over those 4 years, and things don't work out or they don't ultimately reach their goals, what's that process like, and how do you overcome those maybe negative emotions of, man, it just, there's not much to say other than this just sucks, like you did everything you could and it didn't work out, versus like the athletes that cut corners if things don't work out right, it's a lot more cut and dry, like, oh well, you could have changed things. What's the process on the opposite hand when an athlete does everything they're supposed to, and the sport's unforgiving, unfortunately.
Yeah, it sucks. I'm not gonna lie to you. You know, uh, I probably come across as like fairly stoic and maybe not that emotional to the guys on the team, but there's definitely been times that I've like teared up at a race and just kind of walked off because I didn't want anyone to see it. And especially, I feel like the regional meet outdoors can be a really really tough meet, and seeing someone have their career ended there just sucks. And yeah, I kind of had a conversation with one of the guys that graduated this year, and there were a couple times he didn't run great, and he was talking to me that he wished I had said more to him, and I was like, dude, I didn't, like, I know you do everything you can to be good, and it just wasn't going well, and I didn't know what to say. I just flat out was like, I didn't know what to say to you. But yeah, when you can really tell someone's super invested, um, and then them as an athlete know that you're invested too. When it doesn't go well, it sucks. I don't know there any other way to put it. I don't know that I even necessarily handle it the best. I try to just let them know I care about them and that I'm sorry. Um, but yeah, those things are. I don't know that there's a real way to prepare for that because you're never as an athlete preparing for a negative outcome. You're trying to be, and I'm, trying to be as positive as I can in the preparation for stuff like that. So you're not even thinking like, oh I'm going to Kentucky this weekend, and this may be the last time I ever put this uniform on. Like if you're thinking like that, it probably will be the last time you put the uniform on. So then in the moment when it happens and you miss NCAA's by .1 or something like that, and ran a good race, it just didn't happen. It just sucks. So yeah, I don't know that I am an expert in handling that.
You mentioned this a minute ago. Graduate from Georgetown, athletic career is over. Shift the focus to coaching. Spend 2 years at Syracuse. In 2010, you actually were a big part of helping lead the men's team to a team championship in the Big East. That was awesome. You come back to Georgetown. What was that decision to come back to Georgetown like? And I mean, as we talk here today, you've kind of just been such a pivotal part of the program over these last, like, however many years, way longer than I've been following the sport. What does Georgetown mean to you? Obviously you went to the school, you've coached the school for so many years, started your career there, come back to the school, you're Mr. Georgetown. What's special about this school?
Yeah, I think going to Syracuse was super important. I think you look at both, or all three of us, myself, Milt, and Mike, learned so much from Coach Henner and kind of just knew like one way of doing everything. But Milt left and worked at Columbia for a little bit. Mike lived in Flagstaff for a little while. Obviously, Coach Fox is one of the better coaches in NCAA history, winning a national title at Syracuse in 2015, and I got to, obviously I left in 2012, so I take zero credit for any of that, but I kind of got to see some of the building blocks along the way and learn a different way of doing something. So that was just really important for my development as a coach, to learn that, oh wait, there's other ways of doing this. But yeah, what makes leaving there wasn't easy, but a job opened up. I was obviously close with Coach Henner. A lot of my friends that I went to school with lived in DC, and none of them lived in Syracuse. So as like a 24-year-old, however old I was, that was fairly appealing to me. But yeah, just the history at Georgetown. Like, you look at our record books and how long we've been good. It's a cool place. There's not that many places. Obviously, I mean, we're in a conference with Villanova that has the same type of thing. So sometimes I think we take it for granted. But our alums pay really close attention to what we do, which is exciting, but also can be stressful when things aren't going well. So I think always kind of having that pressure looming over you of like, hey, people have done really, really incredible things at this school. You're this really small piece of it, but wanting to like live up to that is motivating for me. I guess you could take it as stress, but it makes me want to recruit and coach as much as I can. DC is a really nice place to train too. I'm sure Rob could tell you that. Kind of, not to diminish the running in LA, but I know he really enjoyed running in DC a lot more than he did at his previous stops. So there is that, but yeah, I just think a lot of it is like how good the program has been for a really, really long time. And you kind of like feel that when you're there. We do a good job of bringing alums back to campus to speak to the team once or twice a semester. So they're like, they know the history, and yeah, they just want to like be a part of that as much as I can.
As a coach over these past 12, 15 years, what are some ways you think you've changed from that first year of coaching to now this 2024 version?
I'm way more calm. Yeah, I used to probably say stuff maybe in a moment that probably couldn't get away with anymore. But I've definitely learned having, especially if something goes poorly, and probably also if it goes super well, having like in-depth conversations at meets has never been super productive for me, because both myself and the athlete are probably pretty emotional in that moment. So a lot of times, especially if it doesn't go well, just saying, hey, come to my office on Monday, let's talk about it. Both of us have a couple days to think more about it. I think you have a productive conversation versus probably when I was really young, I wanted to say something right away, and that, I think I was dumb. So I'm glad that I don't do that as much anymore. But yeah, I think I used to just like live and die by each small little thing that happened, whether it was a recruiting battle or a race not going exactly how you want. And that's just not a sustainable way to coach. So learning like, hey, there's a lot of good schools out there. You're going to lose a bunch of recruits. That's okay. And there's a lot of races. Want to be as good as we possibly can, but kind of just, I always talk to the athletes about being pretty even keeled in how they do things. So I just need to take my own advice in that regard.
Obviously, over the years, you've had tremendous athletes do all sorts of things in this sport. We have talked a lot about, the athletes who don't make it and who don't make it to the next level. From your experience of the ones who do make it to the next level, what are some attributes that they embodied during their time at Georgetown that you think allowed them to make it to that next level?
Yeah, I think just the belief in themselves, and honestly, huge students of the sport. Like I get frustrated with some of the guys on the team that don't know a lot about running. I say to them, like, this is like if you were a college basketball player and you didn't watch the NBA. I was like, that seems insane to me. So I like, try to come to practice on a Monday and quiz some of them on maybe like some races and stuff that happened over the weekend. Because I just think you learn so much from it. And like, if you're going to be good at the next level, you got to watch races like what happened yesterday. So yeah, obviously like the talent and the work ethic and the discipline, but they were all like students of the sport. Even someone, Coach Joe White, in he was an 800-meter runner for us, ran 145, was third at NCAA's. He was really new to running in high school, and he knew nothing about it. And I would say within like 6 months of being in college, he knew about as much about track as any person that I've ever met, and was just a sponge and like really wanted to learn as much about it as possible. So, and I could just tell he was really serious about it. Even though he came in with like zero, his parents weren't runners, his high school team barely had a track team, so he had no like background in the sport other than that he happened to be talented. But I think being a student of the sport is important.
I know I'd get some flack from the audience if I didn't ask you about this. First impressions of Spencer Brown, and what was it like being his coach for 4 years?
Uh, I love Spencer. I enjoyed it. Yeah, he got good right away. I was actually shocked that he wasn't that good at cross country in high school, and he did redshirt cross country his freshman year, but he was like really crushing like the threshold workouts we were doing, and he was beating a lot of guys in his grade in those workouts that would have killed him in a 5K in high school. Definitely a goofy guy. I think he like shaved his like he had like the cul-de-sac thing that like bald guys have. He did that his freshman year and just like showed up to practice one day with that. So super goofy. Um, and yeah, I thought his YouTube channel was kind of a joke at first. Like I think he started doing it like his freshman year over break, and the videos were weird. And he like would always ask, "Can I film at practice?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's no problem with me. I don't have an issue with that." So I'm happy for him. Uh, kind of how it all worked out, and yeah, he's one of the like running YouTube uh, OGs. He kind of paved the way for some people. I feel bad for him that he couldn't monetize it when he was in college. He probably would have been, if he was right now, he'd be making some good money. So I make fun of him sometimes about that. But yeah, yeah. My initial reactions, I guess, were uh, kind of goofy kid, but way better at cross country than I ever would have guessed.
I think maybe it was his senior year, because did he do 5 years? Did he do a fifth year?
He did do a fifth year.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe it was his fourth year when he was like, broke four for the first time and started filming every single track workout. It became this focus on Georgetown that I mean, again, I'm younger, so I haven't been around the block, but I remember caring about Georgetown a way in which I never thought I would have before, and probably hadn't about other teams. Did you feel that? And what was that kind of like from his channel being more of a joke to, I'm sure seeing kids come up to him at meets and, pulling the camera out as y'all are ripping on the 333-meter track?
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, it's cool for me now that I can go back. There were some like fun moments along there that he filmed. Like there was an NCAA meet in at Texas A&M. Spencer was 800 leg on the DMR. We were the last seed, and we came in third. And no one was talking about us ahead of time. I think we outkicked our anchor, outkicked Scott Carpenter, outkicked Oregon. So reliving that, and obviously I can watch the race online, but having the commentary from him and Darren Fahey and Scott on there is cool. I remember when Spencer ran 3:39 at Brian Clay, which it's still a fast time in college, but at the time was pretty fast. I was annoyed with him because there were just so many people coming up. Like I wanted to leave, and he was doing his cool down afterwards. And that track at the Brian Clay, like they let anyone on there, so the infield is crazy. So we definitely like felt that he was getting popular. Myself and the people on the team made sure that we made fun of him and kept him humble at the same time.
As you should.
But yeah, it's fun to look back, see those workouts, and remember that there was one of his. I forget what course it was. There was some cross country course that we ran the last couple of years, and I told the guys to watch one of his videos because we hadn't been to the course before, and I was like, he actually films the course pretty well here. You can get a feel for it. So it's been useful a couple times.
I do have to ask you on my mental note. It was on my mental list to ask you today. The track, 333 meters. Only know about it from Spencer and the other athletes who have worked with you over the years. Just general, is Georgetown ever gonna get? You talk about this alumni base. Will we ever scrape together enough money to have a 400-meter track? Would you even want that? And how long into the coaching gig did it take you to really understand the splits and where at the track is 400, all these marks? I mean, you guys are one of one with this, right? In off track,
I don't want to. I don't want to say one of one because there may be
okay.
other schools. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, would I like to have a 400-meter track? Sure. I mean, they number of times. Usually, when a recruit visits, I try to schedule stuff so that they don't see it. But there's certainly been a number of times where some of like the very best recruits in the country are up there, and there's like people walking their dogs and little kids riding bikes up there that I'm like, they're not coming. So yeah, I think it honestly would help us more in recruiting than like physically. The track is fine. It's got wide gradual turns, which the issue with a short track would be if the turns were super tight or something like that. And we've had people run some fast time trials on that, so I don't think it prevents anything from us from a physical level. My freshman year at Georgetown, it was a dirt track. Like we would finish morning runs on it, and it wasn't done. And we didn't have a track.
Wow.
We were going to a high school track in Northern Virginia. It was like a 4-mile run from campus, but it's on this bike path that's completely uphill. And the first time I ran, I was like gassed before the workout started because it's a pretty hilly bike path. We actually do workouts on it now.
Isn't it
But
called
no,
like
I ran on
Custis
it
or
as an
something?
athlete.
I remember about
What?
this from. Isn't it called like Custis or something? I
Yeah,
remember. Yeah, from
yeah. So
Spencer's
we had to
videos.
literally. I tell the guys all the time. I'm like, this was our warm up when we ran to the track. Sometimes Coach Henner would drive us in a van, which was like, I was so happy about. But most of the time we had to run there. But yeah, then my sophomore year we got that track, so I was used to running on it, and it's all I knew. So uh, I've never worried too much about it. I mean, a lot of the top like Africans in the world train on dirt tracks, and I don't think it prevents them from from being great. So um, yeah, I mean, we're obviously if some kids are looking for this beautiful track facility, we're just not going to be the place for them. But I mean, like I was saying earlier, we have nice trails and stuff like that. DC is a really nice place to run. The rest of our facilities, like our weight room and stuff like that, are nice. So um, yeah,
And
I
if you're going to college purely for the facilities, you probably don't want that type of kid, anyways.
true, yeah, and that's just like not like yeah, not the type of kid we're probably gonna get. But I like the track. My like when we're gone at cross country meets, and especially when freshmen are doing workouts, like they're redshirting, I'm constantly worried that they don't know like where to start a rep or what the splits are and stuff like that. Some people learn it faster than others, but yeah, that first like when we go to Nuttycombe or something like that, that first time that we're like gone for a somewhat significant period of time, and I'm sending workouts to freshmen, I'm like they're gonna botch this, but they learn eventually.
So splits. Do you have like the in your head, or are you just like a math wizard in terms of
I'm not,
converting
well,
through?
I'm good at track math,
Okay.
regular math, no. But yeah, so we just put like cones throughout, and if I'm just timing one group, I'll usually just walk up to the next cone. If I'm timing multiple groups, I'm kind of standing in the middle, and it is, yeah, it probably keeps my brain sharp. Sometimes, like when we were uh, in Eugene, had some guys do workouts on a 400-meter track, and I was like, I just stand here the whole time. I'm not walking to. I was telling them I was getting bored. But Yeah, I have learned they'll know like the reps, but the splits take them like a lot longer to figure out. Like almost before every rep, they're like, "Where's my 200?" And I'll have to like explain where their split is, but they learn eventually. Or if not, they hear me yell, so
Sure.
they'll figure it out.
Was there ever an athlete who ran a crazy split in practice that they thought was legit, and you were like, no, it was actually this? Or on the contrary, like super slow, and you're like, no, it was actually on pace.
No, so my the year I was volunteering at Georgetown, um, a guy was a grade below me, a friend of mine, Andrew Bumbelow, who's in Bowerman a long time, made a world team, great runner. He got mono during his 5th year, and actually had like a miraculous. He got third at our conference meet in the 5K, and then got third at NCAA's and third at USA's. Like he just rapidly got better. But his first workout back, he was doing like some easy 500s, and I was starting him at the wrong place, so he was running like 10 or 15 meters too long, and he looked like dejected afterwards because he wasn't hitting the pace. And then Coach Henner found out that I was giving him the wrong split and was so pissed off at me. Um, so that's the main one that I remember, and maybe Andrew got some extra fitness out of that, and why he got third at USA's that year. But um, yeah, that's the only main one. Again, sometimes I guarantee it's happened when I have not been there, that one of them has messed something up and they probably just didn't tell me. But I'm pretty good at this point. But yeah, I guess that one I felt horrible afterwards because Adrian's one of my friends, and it was like his first workout back after having mono, and it just did not go well, and it was 100% my fault. So I deserve to get yelled at on that one.
I'm curious to get your take on this. How much of coaching do you think is art versus science?
For me, art, because I was never good at science, but I learned. Coach Henner, I believe, had his master's in exercise science, so I did learn a good amount from him. Mike Smith's incredible with that stuff, but I know the basics, like enough of it. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of it is art, especially like kind of looking at like some of the people that have been successful at Georgetown, like a Coach Gags back in the day. I think he would tell you like the exact same thing. I mean, to me, it's not that complicated. Like, get aerobically strong, improve your leg speed, you'll probably get pretty good. So, if it was overly science, I don't think it would be something that I could be successful at. So if you saw my transcript, you would know my all my grades within the science courses were not particularly great.
Do you think that's something the running world is doing wrong today in terms of overcomplicating? I always get frustrated at the high schoolers who I talk to who are like, oh, should I be doing double threshold? Or I did double threshold. And I'm like, no, like it's back to our conversation. I'm like, go play basketball. Like you're thinking way too much about this.
Yeah, I think people definitely overcomplicate it. I mean, I'm intrigued by the science and what it would tell you. I mean, like our reality is at Georgetown is I coach like 25 people, and I probably couldn't be sitting there testing everyone's lactate. Like I just our practices wouldn't work. So I haven't switched that. I'm like intrigued by the science, but at the same time, like, um, I have a Jack Daniels book that can give you some give you a pretty good idea of what you're doing. It kind of like dumbs down the science for people of my intellect, and helps me with the paces and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm sure there are people that do overcomplicate it. If I was coaching pros in a small group, I would probably do all the lactate stuff, and it's just not our reality in college. But I also think like you can, um, yeah, get really good with that, especially a high school kid. I don't think they need to be doing any of that type of stuff.
Coach Bonsey, two more questions for you. First one, more serious. Second one, classic, fun one. First question for you. It's a question I ask, I think, every coach who comes on the podcast. The listener base of this podcast is serious. They want to get good at the sport, and there's no better person to answer this question than one of the best coaches in the NCAA. What does it take to be great at the sport of running?
Yeah, it just takes like dedication and belief in yourself. I mean, obviously it takes talent. I mean, I guess the number one thing would be have the requisite talent to get good. But beyond that, being willing to just kind of like put your head down and grind and believe in yourself, no matter what. Because especially, whether it's when you're 14 years old as a freshman in high school racing 18-year-old boys, or when you're 18 or 19 years old at the college level racing, like I've seen some schools sign 28-year-olds recently. Like you're going to be racing people that are a lot older than you, more physically mature than you, have trained harder than you. You're probably going to get beat a lot along the way, but just being willing to kind of like grind and put your head down, and enjoy the process of getting good versus just being results oriented. If you're fully results oriented, this is a super, super hard sport. But being able to just like enjoy the grind, enjoy the improvement, and just, yeah, that's I think would be the biggest thing beyond having the talent.
Final question for you. The question I ask every single guest on every single podcast. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
What would oh man, I'd be so scared. I don't know. Being from Maine, I'd probably have to make something like seafood based. My mom was just up here and she made a really, really good seafood chowder. So it was delicious. So I think I would just ask her for her recipe. But yeah, get some fresh seafood from up in Maine, and hope that I don't botch my mom's recipe that much. Because I think if he tried my mom's one, he would think it was pretty good. I just can't guarantee that I'd be good at it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, Coach Bonsey, really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. I think I've mentioned this to you, but the athletes I've come to know who you've coached over the years only have incredible things to say about you, and I credit their success on the track and off the track and their real world success to you. So what you're doing for the sport is truly remarkable. I appreciate it as someone who follows the sport, and really appreciate the conversation today and all the insights you brought to the table. So keep crushing it, and looking forward to seeing the Hoyas compete this fall.
Thank you for the kind words, and yeah, I appreciate it.